What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and tonight I have David Fitzgerald with me. Hey there, David. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Good to be here. I've got like 10 cats in the room that all decide they want to be on the podcast tonight too, so that could be fun.
Yeah, they're like, oh, what are you doing in here? Something that I can get in front of?
What's going on in here?
All right. Well, tonight we're going to be discussing, a lot of different things. One thing we're going to be discussing is whether or not Jesus existed. If you guys don't know, both David and I are mythicists, so we're here to take your questions. If you got any questions about, my camera went out.
Oh, no. And the place it froze. My goodness, there it goes.
Yeah, I got it. If that happens, I just have to hit the reconnect. But anyways, so we're going to be taking questions on that, but we're also going to be talking about a little bit more than that. David actually is currently working on a book where he's diving into like the history of religions and the evolution of religions and everything. Well, I'll let David sort of talk about what he's looking into.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's in a nutshell. I'm known, as you guys probably know already, for making the argument that Jesus never existed and written several books about that. The new book isn't specifically about Jesus. It's actually about the evolution of all the major world religions and how monotheism, its rocky history, and also looking at the backstory of all the major world religion founder figures. And that started about a year and a half ago. I was working on the sex and violence in the Bible book, which I'm still working on, but I came across some information that blew my mind so much, it kind of just sidetracked me from the sex and violence book. And I thought, I got to get this out here because this is freaking me out. It's really exciting. It's really blowing my mind. And it started in part when I did a talk for the Global Center for Religious Research International Conference on Atheism, which I'll be doing this year as well. And then I did another talk for Freedom for Religion Foundation. And Recovering from Religion Foundation. And both of those were about, is your religious founder figure imaginary? And because one of the things, I've been doing the Jesus myth thing for so long. And before we go too much further on that, I just want to say, it doesn't matter to me personally whether Jesus was real or not. If he was a myth, if he was real, it really doesn't change our atheism. And believe me, if I thought that Jesus was a real guy, even just a real, normal, non-son of God, non-demigod kind of person, you can bet your ass I would be writing a book about that. Because I've said enough about why I think Jesus was a myth. And one of the interesting side effects of that process of arguing that Jesus is just a myth is how many times Buddhists would come up to me and say, yeah, we're having the same debates in our circles about whether the Buddha really exists or not. And ex-Muslims would come up to me and say, yeah, we're having the same debates in our circles about whether Muhammad existed or not. And that really blew my mind. And when I got ready to do this talk about that, I just want to talk about those three guys, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad. But it occurred to me, you know what? I should just kind of look into all the other top 10 religions and see if anybody else matches that pattern and has a dodgy backstory. And as it turns out, every single one of them does. Not saying they're all myths, but it sure looks like that. Not saying they have to be myths for us to be atheists, but it sure looks like they are all made up in kind of all the same fashion and the same way and for the same reasons. So that's the book that I'm really jazzed about right now, and I'm hoping to get that out early this year.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. I mean, I've got all of your books. I even helped with the Jesus Mything in Action cover art, which I hope that's still going pretty well. I know that we've had to do some revisions on occasions, but no, yeah, I totally want to second the idea that, you know, it's not required in any kind of way for Jesus to be a myth. Like, I'm not beholden to that idea. If Jesus was historical, I'm perfectly fine accepting that.
Exactly. And you know what? And there's nothing implausible about that. It's like all these secular reconstructions of Jesus, most of them are completely fine on the face of it until you start digging a little deeper. But I don't think anybody's weird for thinking there was a Jesus, just an average, mere mortal Jesus, because that's certainly the way I was for the first 16 years of my atheism, and it never even crossed my mind to think anything otherwise. And ironically, it wasn't until I got curious about who the real Jesus was in the Gospels. It's like, okay, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are clearly not talking about the same guy, because Matthew's does this, John's does this, Mark's does this, Luke's does this, and they're coming from very different perspectives. And just trying to parse out what I thought was the real Jesus from the Jesus of faith got me curious to know how we can know for sure what he said and what he did, what he really said and really did. And as I said in my book, Nailed, once you start going down, you know, that path, it gets ugly really fast. And I think the quote I said was, once you start pulling on that string, pretty soon you have no sweater, at least in my case.
What would you say? Was there any like one particular thing that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to say, for whether for you considering whether or not Jesus existed as a person?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I mentioned that there's this paradox of either Jesus said all these amazing things. You know, if he didn't do all these amazing things, at least he had miraculous things to teach. And yet nobody outside his cult noticed for the better part of 100 years. Or he didn't do any of these things. He didn't say these things. He didn't commit these miracles. And yet, as soon as he's dead, we have all these feuding little house cults, not just in the Galilee, not just in Jerusalem, but scattered all over the Roman Empire, that argued that there was a divine Jesus, and they just can't seem to agree on any of the facts of his life. And the difference of Christianity before the Gospels are written and the difference in Christianity after the Gospels are written was a big thing for me. And just actually going a little further into research and realizing that I wasn't the first person to question that, and that there were actual scholars out there who had been saying, there's reason to think there might not have been a Jesus at all. That alone kind of blew my mind. And that was the better part of the year.
Right. For me personally, it's the profound lack of evidence to solidly say that there was a historical Jesus. So like once you consider all the background information and then look at the actual evidence that we have, it's very underwhelming. And so like I don't feel secure in saying, oh, Jesus was a historical person, because we just simply don't have the kind of evidence that we would need to be able to say that with any kind of confidence.
Yeah, I think we're well past the point where we just need to give him the benefit of a doubt, because, and you hit the nail on the head. All our evidence for the biographical evidence for Jesus comes from these 4 Gospels, ultimately. And all 4 of them ultimately come from the first one. And it seems to be an allegory from start to finish. And Paul's Jesus and everybody in Paul's generation, their Jesus seemed very different from the Jesus of the Gospels. And Christians start preaching differently before the Gospels are written and after they're written. And it's all those things, and many more. It's like there's also, it's not just arguments of silence, which is fine, but it's also arguments of why would a Christian be saying this in the 1st or 2nd century if they thought Jesus was real? Why would they say this if they thought this or that part of the gospel story was real? Or if they knew Mary and his brothers and sisters? It's like if Paul thought that James was the brother of Jesus, why just a few verses after he says he met the brother of the Lord, does he say, I don't know who these guys are, the Jerusalem church leaders, and they seem like nothing to me, and they seem like fake Christians to me. And he doesn't give in to them for a minute. It's like those kind of things, like, does not add up to me. And again, we could play this game all day, and I've done for 4 different books now. And it's not like this is my idea. None of this is my idea. This is all following the scholarship of people all across the theological spectrum as much as I can. As much as I can, I try to cite the work of Christian scholars or Jewish scholars, believing scholars, not so nobody can say, "Oh, well, this is just atheists saying this."
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dave, rotate your camera, rotate your laptop just a little to the right, I think. There we go.
How's that?
No, split the difference. I think split the difference. When you lean back, you go way off to the other direction.
All right. I will try really hard to stay right here. How's that?
Cool. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Well, for me, it kind of starts with a strong argument from silence because, like, there are definitely historical or historians that were writing around this time that should have written something about Jesus but don't, and so it's kind of like, well, like why didn't they? And so it's like I'm not saying that strong argument from silence is like evidence that he didn't exist, but it's kind of like, this is curious, why didn't they? And so then you start looking into all the other stuff.
And it's not just authors. I mean, you can, like, there were Victorian biblical scholars who were skeptics who were saying, oh, well, this Roman, this Greek, they didn't mention Jesus, but they were just throwing any names they could find. And it's like, they didn't decide, they didn't look and say, would they have any reason to mention Jesus? But we have plenty of figures who should have mentioned Jesus and didn't, for whatever reason they didn't. And we have plenty of places in the Bible where early Christians or the characters in the Gospels or in Acts are doing things and saying things that don't make any sense if there was a real Jesus around. And we could
I think
spend all day
with that. Yeah, and hold on, I got to reconnect. So I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about the mythicism in general is that there's really only a small subset of premises that are unique to the mythicist argument. Like most of the mythicist argument is built off of widely accepted mainstream scholarship. So
absolutely,
it always,
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
I remember
it's always
when. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yo, your camera tonight. I don't know what's going on, my guy.
You go.
Well, let me jump in while we got to pause. If you remember when Robert Price debated Bart Ehrman made the point of, oh, you mythicists, anytime you see something you don't like, you say it's an interpolation. And Price said, no, it's not the mythicists who are saying these are interpolations. Every single one of these are ones that our mainstream recognizes as interpolations. It just so happens that when that happens, more often than not, it's making the argument for the mythicist side. But that's not because the mythicists are coming up with this. Those are well-recognized phenomena. And we're sure that we haven't found all of them either, by the way.
Right. Exactly. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. But anyways, do you want to go on ahead and get to some calls? Because we got some really good calls already.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we definitely want to hear from anybody in the crowd, both atheists and theists, if they have questions about the historical figure of Jesus or the historical evidence for Jesus or anything like that. So if you got any questions, please do call in. First,
let me preface that by saying, if you are a Christian who wants to call in and debate whether Jesus, I don't like debating Christians on whether Jesus exists or not, because it's such a freaking discussion killer. It's like,
nah, that's what we're here for, though, David. Come on, man. All right.
Fair enough.
I got mouths to feed. What are you talking about?
I can talk with atheists about it, because at least atheists don't have a dog in the lunch.
Do you know how boring that clip title would be? Two atheists agree that Jesus never existed. Fuck that noise. If you're an atheist and you want to call in, I barely care.
It's not like all atheists agree with that. I can assure you that, boy.
Sure. That's fine. That's fine. If an atheist disagrees, they can call too. But I'm excited for the theist calls, to tell you the truth.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, first we're going to get to Emmanuel, slave of Christ. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly there, but Emmanuel, what have you got for us today?
Yeah, my name is Amharic name, so it's kind of hard for American to actually pronounce the name correctly. So I would understand that. So, so I was watching Godless Engineer. I was watching on a YouTube channel, and he was like debating with this guy called like G-Man. You remember that part?
It's been a while, but yeah.
There are two ways. I'm sorry.
It's been a while since I've talked to G-Man, but yeah.
Yeah. So there are two point of like on people's defense. When people try to defend, Christianity or faith or whatever, they actually have like, two ways to actually defend. The one is to defend it like epistemology. So I'm not actually good at defending it, epistemology, because it actually not only you have to read the Bible or study the Bible, you actually have to know a lot of history. But people also debate from experiential part and what Christianity has done in people's lives. And I would love to have like a discussion on, my experience and how I know that Christianity is true.
So let me stop you right there. The reason why I don't really give a lot of credit to experiences is because everybody has their own subjective experience. And I feel like in order for your experience to be indicative of your God, you'd have to have some way of differentiating that from a person of a different faith having the exact same experience and being revealed the exact same things that you were revealed, but yet it's a completely different God. To me, that seems like it's kind of a broken way of determining the truth. And yeah, so
Emmanuel does this from time to time. Emmanuel, you called in and told the screener that you were going to defend that New Testament apostles are credible, and now you're like, but what if instead you just gave me a few minutes to proselytize on your show? And we ain't doing that. I know I've already ruined your life, as you said on Sunday, but whatever. You gotta stick to the topic at hand. We're not just gonna give you an open mic to be a missionary for your bullshit.
Okay, let's go with New Testament apostles being credible. So the New Testament apostles, John, Peter, or James or Paul. Yeah. For example, when you look at Paul was a Jew. He was a Jew. He was a Jewish man who knew the Old Testament scripture, and he knew what's written in the book of what Moses wrote in the Old Testament. So he was saying that,
you're already opening.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
So what I would say is there are parts in Paul's writings that are verifiable, and there are parts in the gospel that are not verifiable. That we just have to like accept it by faith because we don't actually have evidence for it. So there are parts in the gospel that are not verified. For example, we could see that when Scripture says that. Hold on,
Emmanuel. If we can forego any evidence that requires faith, because faith is not a good way to know the truth of reality. So, do you have any empirical evidence, evidence that doesn't require faith or anything like that, something that we can actually analyze ourselves to determine whether or not it's historical evidence?
And if you want to talk about the historicity of the apostles, we could talk about that. We could talk about the disciples. We could talk about the evangelists who wrote the Gospels. I'm happy to talk about any of those things.
Okay.
Turn off your vibrator, Emmanuel.
I thought it, and Jimmy said it.
Emmanuel, you use the word credible. New Testament apostles are credible. That's not a faith statement. So just defend that, buddy. His vibrator shorted out his phone.
Oh dear.
Emmanuel, did you mute the phone with your face? Did you think you were turning off your vibrator and you accidentally turned off the phone? We'll put Emmanuel back in the queue or see if he calls back.
Right. Okay. I'll return Emmanuel to the queue there, and we'll get to. I guess we'll move on to Jason, who's a theist in Pittsburgh. Hey there, Jason. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Good.
Yeah.
So,
What's up, Jason?
So, David, I have a friend request coming your way on Facebook, and I had messaged you about the book I'm writing, Jesus Over the Rainbow, Dissecting the Worldview of Anti-LGBTQ Christians. So, right now, the biggest thing, and I'm meeting with an academic on Thursday because I'm in the unenviable position of being a theist, but trying to challenge homophobia and transphobia within. Luckily, I'm in a. Go ahead.
I feel your pain there. That is not a fun place to be in. Let me ask you this: why, as an LGBT person, would you want to follow a religion that gets it all wrong when it comes to LGBT issues?
Well, I mean, some denominations do. I'm fortunate to be part of the Presbyterian PCUSA that is what I observe to be radically inclusive. It doesn't make sense. I agree. I'm, as a person, I'm socialized into Christianity, although I really don't. I go into the book that the book is not theology. It's a historical critical approach to the clobber verses.
Hey, sorry, let me just pop in here, and I got to keep doing production stuff like this. Jason, can you turn off whatever background audio that is? It sounds like the show's going on in the background, and I don't know if you can make adjustments to your microphone, but about every 2 seconds, there's like an eighth of a second where you just drop out. If we could eliminate both of those things, that would up our production value tremendously.
Does that sound okay?
Right now, I don't hear anything, but yeah, I'll drop in if it gets bad again.
Okay. So yeah, it's not theology. The book, and I shared it from my drive, but what it comes down to is that it's really Paul is in Romans. So that exegesis is really going to be, that's the last in my endeavor, but Joel
Jason,
had talked to me. Yes.
I think I don't mean to cut you off, but I think you're going to love my chapter on Paul in the Sex and Violence in the Bible book, because Paul, the irony of Christianity is that so much of its homophobia comes from Paul, who, it seems to me, and I talk about this at length, seems to be a totally self-loathing homosexual. And the irony of that kind of blows me away.
That's my thing. And I think that there's a couple, I forget the name of the book that I was watching a lot of the YouTube stuff on it, where there's a theologian, I think he's since passed, where he presents a pretty cogent argument.
None shall be strong, maybe?
Yes. So is it that just, is it, and I guess the question is, I don't want to go in there, like, I just wonder if making that claim, because I go into there and I talk about Paul, that, he's, for all intents and purposes, despite what fundamentalists will tell you, the founder of Christianity. Yeah. The movement that would become Christianity. Yeah. So we don't know a lot about him. And
exactly. It's weird that of all the first century of Christianity, isn't it weird that we have so much that's from Paul and nobody else? We've got all these letters that are forged in the names of other people, but that's always been weird to me that it's this one guy, and half of the stuff attributed to him are forgeries written in his name. So most of the people who love Paul only are getting half the story of Paul.
Well, and I think I just wonder, just presenting this, is the thesis basically that he wasn't married, which would be scandalous for Pharisee in the first century.
Sure,
and
but,
he had a serious aversion to sex, is evidenced in 1 Corinthians, where he says, if you gotta have sex,
I wish all men were like me.
Yeah, he's like, if you gotta have sex, at least get least get married. But I guess the question I have is that that I guess I saw in the argument that he continuously refers to the thorn in his flesh.
Exactly. Thank you. That is a big one for me too, and I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
That he's got this thing that dwells in his members and makes him do what he does not wish to do. Yeah, and he goes on from there.
If it was a physical ailment, he would have specified it. Like if he had some type of physical.
Sure. He loves talking about that kind of thing. Yeah.
So
yeah, he's happy to
so I guess,
about what he's.
Is that the argument there? Just to say, is that because that he wasn't there?
The book of Philemon, I break down because that's just a short little letter, but man, it is full of like, whoa, did you really just say that, Paul? Okay, well, okay. About the slave boy Onesimus, who he wants to have sent back so badly, because he ministers to him in his chains, that kind of thing, and and a lot of the same arguments that John Shelby Spong made, I found very credible too. It was the same thing with the Jesus myth. That was one of those things that when I read it, it's like, yes, thank you. I thought I was the only one that thought like this. And even he says that he's not the first person to said that, and he's not trying to be salacious by suggesting that Paul was homosexual. But
what is the response from fundamentalists? Like, what is their like? There was a debate he had with someone. And is it just like, what is their response to the claim? Like, it seems to me they're just like, well, that's just outrageous.
I think that's exactly
their argument.
I think that is exactly the response is, la, 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 I can't hear you. That's just silly. He couldn't be gay because God hates gay people. That's about the extent of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope that, like I said, I sent you, it's under Jason Van Ness's the request on Facebook. Josh, I'm your Godless Engineer. I'm your Facebook friend already. And if you look at the content, yes, like I said, I agree, David, that it's crazy. Like, why would you want to be? But it's just, I found a church that is radically inclusive in Pittsburgh, PA on everything. And I get it. Like, they're like, why would you want to? But this book is really, I think, more or less addressed at probably survivors, people who are ex-evangelicals. But I guess that's the part I'm at, is that it all comes down to Paul. Romans, 1 Corinthians.
Yeah. We could talk about that a lot. But my job's not to turn you to an unchristian. Because if your Christianity or whatever your faith structure is makes you a better person, makes you care about others more, makes the world a better place, I'm all for it. That's great. Yeah. If you ask me if it's true, if you ask me if it as a whole makes the world a better place, we could have a whole different conversation. But I think believers, this is controversial in atheist circles, but I think most believers have good, rational reasons to be their belief that have nothing to do with their beliefs being good or rational or true.
No, like I said, Dale Martin's book, Biblical Truths, is what really helped me through that process. He says the same thing. He totally knows everything he's reading is not true in terms of scripture. He says it's what he's socialized into. So that's, I think, what works for me. But that works for me. That's my experience. I'm not extrapolating that, and I don't feel the need to evangelize. So, okay, well, if you see that invite for the tweet, I'd like any commentary on that, and hopefully accept my friend request, and I'd like to look up your stuff to see if that can be any help for that part when I go introduce that. Just basically, was he gay?
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jason. Well, and if I can't add you immediately, I just need to piss off some libertarians and see who drops me, and then Facebook will let me add more people. But I should be okay.
Okay. Stay safe, everyone.
You too. Take care. Bye. Sorry.
See you later, Jason.
Bye.
Did you want to add something under that?
Well, I was going to use what you had said as a jumping off point to ask him, like, why does he believe in general, like in God, and especially considering Christianity has a very anti-LGBTQ past. I was just going to ask him, like, why does he believe in the first place? But I was going to do it in the context of, like, I'm perfectly fine with people believing, in a God, if they want to, as long as they don't, like, negatively affect, others by pushing, their rhetoric, through government or whatever. But I'm always very curious as to why people are convinced by their positions. But he seemed ready to get off the call.
Yeah. Well, he also seemed like he's not being dogmatic about any part of this. I get the impression, and as somebody who grew up in a church family, I get it. It's like when your social network is all built around the church, that's your extended family, and you don't want to do anything that messes up your family. So I get how that would be really appealing. And, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, he'll be in a completely different space. We'll see.
We'll see. Let's try to get Emmanuel back on to see if he wants to talk more about the New Testament apostles. Hey, Emmanuel.
Yeah. So I just want to talk specifically about Paul and Peter. So as I was saying, there are things that in the New Testament that are valid, and we could actually, have, we don't even need like faith, to guide us to that kind of truth. But there are parts in the New Testament or parts in the gospel that we don't have, evidence, or we don't have, except being written on the Bible, we don't actually have any kind of verifiable evidence. Like the part when Jesus...
Even a little worse than that, because we have things that we do have evidence against what it says in the Gospels.
Yeah, it could be. So what I think is, what I deep down believe is, things that are claimed in Scripture. For example, me, I believe that, Scripture is the Word of God. And, God is the Word, and that became a flesh. I'm sorry?
But why?
Because I just don't want to, change topic. It's just like the impact that it had on my life and stuff. So, especially the
subjective
things
reasons
that are... Yeah, not just that. For example, people have been mean to me. There are people who have been mean and very rude. And, I've seen a lot of things in my life that are really bad. But, Jesus says that, love your enemies, don't respond evil with evil, respond evil with good. And, love everybody. Last time I tried to talk with Nikki about this, unfortunately, I didn't have, time because, I went on too many topics on the day. But I was just saying that, people could be like racist and, all bad things. But Jesus says that you have to forgive them either way. So that's the impact that I've had. If I never believed in Christianity,
I'm gonna pop in again. I'm gonna pop in again because Emmanuel's done what we told him not to do, which is he's not actually here to engage in argument. He's here to proselytize about the good word of how much Jesus will change your life. He's not here to argue about whether it's true. He just wants to get his little message out. Emmanuel, stay on topic and stop trying to slyly do this. We've had you on a dozen calls by now, and you get called out every time you pull this bullshit. So stick to the argument, because it's not going to be about whether something feels good. It's going to be about whether something is true or not, and stay on topic.
And I kind of want to say, and Emmanuel, when you say Jesus said this, first of all, Jesus probably didn't say it because Jesus probably didn't exist. But that aside, what would you say if somebody said the Buddha said we have to love each other, you have to treat everybody as if they're your teacher? Does it matter if that sentiment has anything to do with whether the religion is true or not? It's it's good to love those who hate you and return hate for love. But Jesus is not the only figure that says that. And Jesus was not the first figure to say that. And that's something that a whole tradition has come around about to say. That and many other kinds of things. So over there, for what it's worth.
So the first one that actually said that in the Scripture is even Moses. So not even Jesus in the Bible is the first to say that. What I'm saying is the moral story.
Never says anything remotely like that. I don't see anywhere where Moses says anything of the sort. I'm sorry.
And also the mainstream consensus on Moses is that Moses didn't actually say anything because Moses most likely didn't exist. So
Right.
Moses isn't even the first one to say.
Thinks in the Bible Moses says that. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I think it's found in Leviticus 18, I guess, where Moses says
I don't think that was written by Moses.
love, everybody.
Anything in Leviticus. Leviticus is a very boring book, and it does not say a lot about love or anything about feel good, anything.
Yeah. It has a lot of commands where you have to kill, the other people. But it actually says that you don't have to kill them because they're foreigners or whatever. You just have to kill them because they don't actually keep the Mosaic law. So
can I
that's
say,
why people find Leviticus.
Raise the bar a little higher on meaning Jesus loves you to let's not kill just everybody for no good reason. Yeah.
There's so much subtext because you two haven't gone up with Emmanuel before. Emmanuel thinks that enslaving non-believers is a good thing because it says in the Bible it's a good thing.
Yes. The guy calls him a slave of Christ.
I'm sorry, come again. Are you saying that slavery could sometimes be good?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah. Asked me, do I actually think that way?
Yes.
Well, sure.
Okay.
Sure, that's
so. I do believe that we are enslaved, whether we like it or not. So
okay, so this is what Emmanuel does. This is what Emmanuel does. That Emmanuel, you know the question you're being asked, and you're trying to answer it a different way. So here you go, Emmanuel. Was it good when Jews enslaved heathens under God's commandment? Was that a good thing?
Absolutely, because
that's enough. Yes is enough. Yes, okay. Yes is enough to show how morally bankrupt you are.
Yeah, I do. Okay. The fact that you said that you're talking about a verse about love and said that Moses said that, and now we can't find where that verse is, and maybe it's somewhere in Leviticus, a chapter not known for love.
Let me give you the verse. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17 and 18 is found.
I'm all ears. Tell us about the love.
It says that don't revenge the other people that is living around you. I am the Lord God, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And it will be
that's a long way to pretend you're reading a verse, huh?
No.
You cited a verse and then didn't read it, and then gave your real dumb interpretation of it.
Okay. Emmanuel, here, let me. Emmanuel, let me read it. Okay.
Leviticus 19:17. Okay. Leviticus 19:17.
Hold on.
I'm actually
Emmanuel.
On my hand. Okay.
Emmanuel, let me read it. Okay.
I'm going to read it.
No interpretation. New International Version, NIV. Okay. It says Leviticus 19:17 to 18.
Can you use New Living Translation? Can you use New Living Translation?
You have to understand all the other Gospels are untrue besides New Living Translation.
Oh, okay.
I'm not. Anyway, but go ahead. Let's see what it says. New Living Translation.
Whatever. Do not nurse hatred in your heart for any of your relatives. Confront people directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Now, what these verses do not do, and maybe we just need to leave it at this because we're not actually going to be talking about any kind of historical evidence for Jesus or Paul or anything that Paul said. But in this particular part, it doesn't talk about loving your neighbor as like a general love statement. This is about the in group of the Israelites. It's talking about don't seek revenge or bear a grudge against your fellow Israelite. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if this is the source for what Jesus says in the New Testament, then Jesus is not saying to love everybody. He's not pushing this idea of just
It's a catch-22.
unconditional love. Right.
Yeah.
He's saying love fellow Christians, only love fellow Christians. Is that what you're getting out of it?
No, because it actually, on my hand, I have Gleason English Bible, and it actually says that you should not hate your brother because it will be a sin unto you.
Dude,
not
Emmanuel, we have to get back to the topic. Emmanuel, it means your literal fucking brother. Okay. It means love the Jews, hate the Gentiles. You need to learn the Bible, my guy.
Yeah, right. But when you go down, it actually says that don't hate the foreigner that is among you.
What? Where?
I could actually.
That is not in the section that you quoted. Cited. Sorry.
Yeah.
The other even more true translation.
It's in the same. It's in the same chapter, the 34th verse. You can read
I would much rather we were reading
verse.
Even the King James version, but especially like the New Revised Standard version gives us a more honest translation in most cases.
Right.
Because that just smacks of
actually. It's not just
it's
for
literally
the
talking about accepting people who are converting. You fucking.
No, because if you actually accept other. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I think that we need to go because we do have other calls to get to, and since we're not actually going to be talking about history or anything relevant to what we're supposed to be discussing tonight, I feel like we have people that actually want to discuss the topic. So
I have one last question for Emmanuel.
Okay.
Sorry, I know I'm popping in on this one a lot, but I deal with this guy a ton. Emmanuel, how did I ruin your life?
Okay. Oh, I was actually joking because, I saw Nikki and I was seeing her another day and I just got like obsessed with her channel and stuff.
Oh, I see.
She's actually beautiful. Yeah.
It was almost a compliment, but in a super creepy way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super creepy comment. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah. Don't let your vibrator break your phone next time. See you, bud.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Well, that was fun.
All right. Okay. All right. So next up, we've got Kai from Arizona. I believe that I'm pronouncing that correctly. What's up there, Kai?
Hey, Mr. Godless Engineer, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the other host's name. Who else am I speaking to this evening?
Call me Dave.
Fitzgerald.
Dave, pleasure to talk to you, Dave. And I saw the topic. I'm very, very interested in discussing one of the big piece of evidence that makes me feel like there was an underlying preacher, probably called Yeshua, that lived around the time that the alleged Jesus of Nazareth lived. Can I go ahead and present my line of thinking, and you can tell me what I'm maybe missing or got wrong?
Definitely.
Sure.
Okay. So, I think most folks would acknowledge, and you can jump in and tell me if I got it wrong. I know you will. Most folks would acknowledge that the prophecies about Messiah indicated he was going to be from the city of David, from Bethlehem, and there's a whole bunch of them that you could go look up. I'm sure you're all familiar with them.
Well, there are also prophecies.
Not say again?
About other places. Yeah. There are also other prophecies you could point to if you were
Micah chapter 5 is one example that describes that the ruler that's going to deliver Israel from the hands of invaders is going to be from Bethlehem. Anyway,
but I think what David's trying to point out is that there are also other prophecies and other understandings and maybe even some scripture that we don't even have now that could point in a different direction as far as the birthplace of Christ. There's several scholarly discussions happening around this particular topic. So.
Right.
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm not even
arguing. This in my book.
I actually don't. My best guess is not that Christ was born in Bethlehem. That's kind of where I'm going with this. I believe that
that's why it's the whole Nazareth versus Bethlehem thing that Hitchens brought up, right? Kai?
Yeah. So why? May I briefly summarize it for any viewers that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So the idea is that there was a guy called Jesus of Nazareth who was very well known, Jesus of Nazareth, and he went around teaching and made a name for himself, being an apocalyptic rabbi. And then he was executed by the Romans for whatever he was executed for, and his followers went on to start Christianity, revolving around this Jesus of Nazareth character. But then in order to make him the Messiah, they shoehorned in a Bethlehem birth narrative that didn't actually happen, just because nobody would believe that he was the Messiah if they said he was born in Nazareth. So they kind of, shoehorned in the Bethlehem thing. Is that about the long and short how you understand it?
Yeah, that's a good way of. Go ahead, John.
Oh well, I'm sorry, David. I was just I've got several questions that come up whenever somebody brings up the whole Nazareth thing. I'm personally not convinced by the Nazareth situation because of the fact that we've got Peter Parker from New York City. We know New York City exists, so therefore there must have been a Peter Parker to base the comic book on, or you can pick any other fictional character from our history, and just because they're said to have come from a place, that doesn't necessarily mean that they actually did come from that place or that they actually existed in the first place.
Let me jump in, John.
May I? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll wait until David's done, and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Kai. One thing that Hitchens points out is, for him, he says the bare fact that of the how did he call it, the hoax of it, that this guy was clearly born in Nazareth and everybody knew it, but Scripture said he had to be from Bethlehem. Well, the fact is, in fact, that our first gospel that all the other gospels were written on doesn't say that he's from Nazareth. It calls him a Nazarene or a Nazorian. It's a sect title, not a place title, and I discussed that in the book quite a bit. And the fact is, there was scriptures that said he shall be born in Bethlehem. Like you said, they had to kind of be tweaked to make it born in Bethlehem, because it's actually talking about out of the tribe of and not necessarily a place. But there was also scriptures that could point to Nazareth because of Netzer, the word Netzer being a branch of David. There was scripture that makes it sound like Mark actually thought that he was born in Canaan or Capernaum. And that's where his idea of where Jesus really came from. So it's one of many examples where everything that we all know about Jesus turns to be hinged on something that doesn't quite mean that originally or in the beginning. And we can play that game with everything in Jesus, from his birth to his death and everything in between. There's lots of things that we take for granted about. Well, and you mentioned it yourself. Even the fact that Jesus was killed by the Romans for some reason, but nothing in his trial makes sense from a Hebrew standpoint. Absolutely nothing historically makes sense in that, from his arrest to his execution. Even Bart Ehrman says this too. It's like all the secular reconstructions of Jesus's life, one thing they can't explain, including the fact that he was a failed apocalyptic prophet, is why would the Romans care? Why would they kill him because he said he was the Jewish Messiah? That wasn't even illegal by Jewish law. Calling yourself the Messiah wasn't blasphemy. If it was blasphemy, they would have just taken him out and thrown rocks at him until he was dead, and that would have been the end of that. There's just no reason, and Bart Ehrman says the same thing about his failed apocalyptic prophet model, that it doesn't really explain why the Romans would care. And to be fair, neither do the Gospels. Nothing the Gospels say about that makes sense either, historically.
Thank you for that response. That's actually very informative, and I hadn't realized the distinction between him being called originally Nazarene, not necessarily Jesus of Nazareth. I didn't realize that distinction, so that's definitely something new I'm taking away. And
I appreciate that.
There's a whole constellation. The thing that I get hung up on is that you're making a positive affirmative claim by saying an individual didn't exist, and that seems to me to be a rather lofty claim, to suggest that in the part of the world that there was not a guy named Yeshua in Galilee at that time period. I mean, that's how
you may have missed the beginning of the talk when I was saying Well, there's nothing implausible about there being a guy named Yeshua. We have lots of Yeshuas. We have lots of failed messiahs of the first century. Nothing's improbable about Jesus being another one of those guys. Nothing. It's just that when we look at his life, our evidence for what we know about him just boils down fewer and fewer. And the more you look at it, the less it looks like anything that we think of as biographical information for Jesus holds up when you kick the tires. And I
think that we're sort of in agreement, because I don't believe he was the Messiah or performed miracles or did any particular thing that he's attributed to have done, or said anything he's attributed to have said in the four Gospels that were written at least decades later. I don't believe any of that to be true. I'm just saying that there very likely was a loud, itinerant apocalyptic preacher named Yeshua that traveled around Galilee and may have been executed. The Romans executed lots of people for lots of reasons, and if there was a preacher that was getting a lot of clout and maybe being called King of the Jews, that might be a good reason for Rome to execute him.
Kai, if I can jump in real quick here. The first thing I want to address is that it's not like we're saying that he 100% did not exist. And, David bringing up that it's perfectly plausible for just some random Jewish rabbi to be going around is a plausible explanation. That means that we're not saying that it's 100% like he didn't exist. We're saying most likely, given the current evidence that we have, he probably didn't exist. And the reason why we say that is, I'm not trying to talk for David or anything, but at least the reason why I say he most likely didn't exist is because there's no solid evidence to suggest that he did exist. And so it doesn't tip me in the direction of historicity. So when you say that, that there most likely was a person walking around, I would need to see evidence for that. Like, what evidence tips it in that direction? And it's definitely not the whole Nazareth thing.
Especially considering that we do have evidence. We do have evidence for all these other.
May I briefly respond to Godless Engineer?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so it's a rather banal claim, though. If I were to tell you that there exists a dog named Rover somewhere in Texas, I don't have any evidence to back that up, but you wouldn't need evidence to accept that. You would shrug it off and say there probably isn't. Who cares?
Well, that's not the claim, though. The specific claim that we're talking about is that there was a very specific person that started Christianity, that influenced like Paul and the other early apostles, that caused Christianity to come into existence. That's the specific claim. Now, I mean, if you were to say, there really was a real dog named Lassie that rescued a Timmy from the well using only his barks to communicate, with the local farmer dude, I feel like that's a little bit closer to the claim of Christianity being, this very specific Jewish rabbi that influenced all these things.
And let me jump in real fast, John, just to dovetail on that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and it's just that, there's nothing implausible about Jesus just being one of those many failed apocalyptic prophets of the first century. The thing is, we have evidence for those guys. We have evidence for several of those guys. And yet, none of them did anything as remarkable as what Jesus does in the Gospels. And yet, they made a dent in the historical record, and Jesus didn't. That's one of the things that makes me wonder about, that's weird. But it's also the fact that everything we look at biographically about Jesus, anything that we try to pin down what he really did and really said, anytime we do that, we're left with the same vanishing bit of evidence. And the more it looks like before the Gospels are written that he's just another celestial Messiah, that he's a mystery faith figure, and he gradually became historicized, not the other way around.
So,
and again, it's no skin off our backs.
Ask a question about then why, if he was a whole cloth invention that was a completely fictitious character that was invented by perhaps the disciple, perhaps perhaps the Apostle Paul, somebody invented this character, or a group of people invented this character. Why not call in Jesus of Bethlehem? Why invent him from the wrong? Why make him up whole cloth and have him originate from the wrong town?
Well, we don't even know in the first book where he came. The original story, the original gospel, starts him at age 30 showing up to be baptized in the Gospel of Mark. Mark didn't care about things like that. He didn't care about, there was no idea of a virgin birth in Mark. He didn't even have Jesus start out as God. His Jesus started out as just a plain, ordinary guy who God adopted at his baptism. And because he was so faithful to God's promises and went all the way through it, even to be crucified for him, at his death, he became exalted and became Lord. The total.
But you see that sort of speaks to my point a little bit more, to suggest that the earliest stories had Jesus coming from Nazareth, and it wasn't until that later authors like Matthew and Luke.
Kai, that's not what I'm saying. Matthew and Luke are not the earliest stories. They all base theirs.
I understand.
Yeah. Nobody before Matthew and Luke says that he came from Nazareth. Not even Mark.
Well, Mark does say that Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee. Mark doesn't say anything about Bethlehem. Bethlehem's invented with Matthew's gospel.
Right. Sorry, I stand corrected.
If Mark or Mark's sources or the other religious leaders were inventing a fictitious character to be the face of their movement, why not call him Jesus of Bethlehem? If he doesn't exist, you can make him Jesus of Beijing, China.
But you're mixing Kai, you're mixing up different things here. The first gospel that we have does not mention Bethlehem, so it makes no sense to be like, hey, why not call him Jesus from Bethlehem? Because Mark, our earliest gospel that provides biographical information about Jesus, doesn't mention that. It does mention Nazareth, but I mean,
I understand. I feel like I'm doing a poor job of explaining my point here. In my head, it makes a lot more sense than what I'm saying out loud. I'm trying to say that Mark calls him Jesus of Nazareth. The Messiah is supposed to come from Bethlehem. If Mark or Mark's sources were making him up.
Hi, let me stop you there. You say the scriptures said he was supposed to come from Bethlehem. Some scriptures could be interpreted that way. Other Jews said other things.
Okay, I think that's where my hang up is.
For that.
And Paul,
not the only game in town.
And if you want to get to like the nitty gritty of the like historical evidence, our earliest historical evidence doesn't talk about Jesus's birth at all, which would be Paul's letters.
Right.
Paul never mentions him coming from any city or town. So I mean, like if you're questioning like why not call him Jesus from here or there, why call him Jesus from anywhere in the first place? Because apparently it didn't matter.
And Paul acts as if he never was on earth at all.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Paul acts as if he was never on earth at all.
The point on that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. The delay has got me messed up. I'm happy to concede the point that David made, that there are many different scriptures that describe the Messiah emerging from many different places. So it's not like they had a hard fast. He must be from Bethlehem. So anyone we're going to say is the Messiah, we have to shoehorn in a Bethlehem story just to make it legit. I'm going to get off the line now so that you can move on to other callers. But I do want to end with one question, and I'll take the response over YouTube or wherever I'm watching. But perhaps David can speak to this. At what point and for what reason would Matthew and Luke or other traditions have decided to add in a previously non-existent Bethlehem story? Like, why did they decide to add that in, when writing their accounts, or where did they get that from? Thank you guys for taking my call. I'll listen to your response, and have a wonderful evening, guys. Thank you.
You too. Those are really good questions he brings up. And he asks, why did Matthew and Luke bother? Well, they added a lot of things to Mark's. Mark's first gospel is our most low-rent, no-frills, stripped-down gospel, most fallible Jesus. So they had lots of things they wanted to say and improve on the gospel. They weren't setting out to write the gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Luke. They were all setting out to write the one true gospel. So Matthew is constantly correcting Mark's mistakes. Luke is acting like, He says in the very beginning of his gospel, so many people are writing gospels now, it seemed like a good idea for me to go out and research the story from the beginning as it's been handed down to our generation and give you the real scoop. And then he steals his story mostly from Mark and Matthew and passes his stuff as his own. But the birth stories and the birth stories in Luke, those are two completely different stories that don't match up at all. They do not sync at all, and neither of them makes sense on its own. So there's all kinds of reasons they were added more. John, when he makes his gospel and it comes around later, he doesn't even try to match up with the other guys. He doesn't even have parables. He has Jesus being crucified for a completely different reason that's not even in the other books. And all four of the books, they are just as filled with small little details that seem realistic but they're complete contradiction to each other.
Right, and I wonder if maybe it would help Kai in understanding where we're coming from, is if he were to understand that it's not like there was a unified Christian like group, right? So
Absolutely.
you've got Mark's group of Christians that wrote the gospel that we now know as Mark, and then you had a separate group of Christians that redacted Mark into Matthew. And, added some things and took some things out, or didn't put some things in there, or whatever. And then Luke was a different group who were trying to write their own gospel. And then John, of course, was also another group. So you had all these different groups that were working together. And see, the thing is that each one of these groups have different scriptures that they take as being like the scriptures about the Messiah.
Right.
And
these are just the four that made the official cut. We still have gospels like the Gospel of Peter that was way more popular than the Gospel of Mark during its day. There were scads of gospels and acts and letters of Paul that never made the cut because for one reason or another. We're only seeing a tiny tip of the Christian iceberg when it comes to early Christian writings.
Right. And I think that it would help him if he, instead of thinking it as one cohesive unit, you think of it as these different Christian groups that were going around, and each one of them had their own set of scriptures that they considered to be about the Messiah, which, if anybody is interested, this is called like Pesher creation, like the creation of Peshers, taking individual verses out of the Old Testament to reveal new information, specifically in this case about the Messiah, I think is kind of what fueled those differences.
And Matthew's constantly doing that, saying, oh, and this was done in order to fulfill this or that prophecy, even when he's talking about prophecies that don't exist or are not saying what he says they say. He's constantly saying this is a midrashic thing. He's saying this was done to fulfill a prophecy when it's just being midrashic, I should say.
Which I mean, this kind of leads me in a direction, and the direction it leads me in is that if you had all of these different groups, and we know that there were different groups of Christians going around, that's not just some wild-haired claim. If there were these different groups and they were having to use the scriptures to know things about Jesus, it kind of makes me question, like, oh, well, was there really even a Jesus in the first place? Like, if there really was, you would think that they would just be able to refer to the information that they knew instead of having to refer to the scriptures.
And yet Paul constantly acts like no one would know about Jesus whatsoever if it weren't for preachers like him. And everything he knows about Jesus, he was taught it by no man. No one told him this. It came from his reading of scripture and personal revelation. He didn't even tell us the story about the road to Damascus story. Luke tells it 3 times. Paul never says anything remotely like that. And before, because one thing that we haven't talked about yet, and I think this kind of bears in mind to say, is talking about the mystery faiths, the Hellenistic mystery faiths. Christianity seems to be a Jewish version of the mystery faiths. And we see that in the way Paul uses the terminology. We see that in verses like Mark 4:11, where Jesus is talking about how I teach in parables. That way, those outside the circle, they won't turn from their sins and be saved. Only you guys will be, because you'll understand it. That makes no sense from the Jesus we grew up with, the Jesus we're talked about in Christianity. It makes perfect sense if we're talking about a mystery faith where you have to be in the club to get the salvation, like the Gospel of Thomas. You have to know his secret teachings to be saved. It hasn't have anything to do with him being crucified for anybody's sins.
I think the caller that we just had was Kai was mostly trying to make the argument that is essentially the reason why Christopher Hitchens rejected mythicism, the suspicion that there was some sort of competence amongst these people as they were collaborating to make the story up. Right. Meanwhile, like the whole Old Testament, I think it's really funny when people are like, what, you really think they would just make someone up though? And it's like, yeah, I know. Like, you mean like Abraham or like Noah or like Moses or like Adam or, you know, like all those people. But you're saying they're going to make up something and they put somebody in the wrong place that he shouldn't be. Oh, you mean like Jews in Egypt during a time where there weren't Jews in Egypt and they're slaves during a time that there was no such thing as Egyptian Hebrew slaves? Like, yeah, no, crazy.
Unless we're not making fun of you, Kai. Those were great questions, and those are awesome questions. And good thoughts.
I'm making fun of Lil. No, I'm kidding. I'm not.
But these are all good questions, and I talk about them in my book, Jesus Mything in Action, which I should plug at some point here, because that book was written for atheists who aren't down with mythicism, and these were the reasons why that I'm not a historicist, where it makes more sense to me that this came out from a completely different direction, that our Jesus was created as a mystery faith figure and became historicized.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of callers left, and I think we're going to try to get through them, before the hour and a half is up, which we're kind of getting close. But next up, we've got Joel from New York. Hi there, Joel. How you doing?
I am doing all right. You're David, right?
I am.
How you doing? And Godless Engineer?
Hey, Joel. Are we on speakerphone? A potato? What's our call situation here? It sounds like you're a mile away, my guy.
I apologize. The call screen told me it was fine. I have headphones in. Let me take them out.
Oh, whatever you're doing right this second is way better.
All right, perfect. I took out the headphones.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I've never called into a call-in show before. I am an atheist, and I'm writing a book in which I take a mythicist perspective. Awesome. And I saw you guys were discussing that, so I thought I'd call in.
Okay.
Very, very, very cool. Yeah.
Thanks. You have a book about mythicism, too, I hear.
1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
4.
Nice.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. I may have to cite that. I should read it. I got Richard Carrier's on the historicity of Jesus at the library waiting to pick up. So
there you go.
Joel, do you have a specific question or topic you wanted to drive this on?
I guess what I wanted to bring up, and I'd like to hear your feedback on this, but kind of the way I'm coming at the question of mythicism is when we push aside all of these, supposedly apostolic texts that don't appear to be apostolic texts, what we're left with is a few Catholic bishops and a few non-Catholic Christians, quote-unquote heretics, who say they actually met apostles or disciples. So I'm looking into those claims, and I'm not finding them credible at all.
Me neither. Well, you will definitely want to look at my books because I talk about everybody up to the 3rd century, 2nd century. I go into a lot of those claims.
Yeah, that would be useful. So the main ones I'm focusing on in the book are Polycarp, Papias. I look at Basilides and Valentinus. I mean, what headway I can make without much of their writings, and Ignatius of Antioch. What are your thoughts on those figures?
Well, for me personally, I feel like by the time that they're writing, like the historical, what we would expect to get historically out of them is already, very tainted. Right. And it's definitely not independent. That's what we're kind of looking for, is independent information about Jesus. And the earliest source that we have that talks about this Jesus is Paul. And so that's where I personally think all of the discussion really resides, is whether or not Paul thought of Jesus as a historical person, because these early church fathers, I mean, they're gonna, so you could probably come up with some of them thinking Jesus as a celestial figure, but what kind of historical value would that give us? And I don't think that gives us a lot of historical value, because they're writing in the early second to mid second century, and this
or
is
later.
Or later. And so I think that they can give us like good ideas on what was being believed by Christians at the time, but as far as like what was the historical like truth about Jesus, I don't think that you're going to be able to get that from them. I think what you really got to look at is Paul's work and what he says about Jesus. And I feel like when you pull the thread on that, as David said, you just start losing the sweater. Like it just kind of all comes apart when you start critically reviewing the very few passages in Paul that seem to indicate like a historical person existed.
And there's so much
I totally
stuff he
agree
does
with
say.
you. Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah. No. I was just going to say, there's so many other passages in Paul where it's like, well, why would he say that if there was a real Jesus? Why would he say that if he knew Jesus had said this or done this kind of a thing? But
a good example of that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say a good example of what David's talking about here is like Paul's teaching on, I believe it's paying your taxes, because Paul teaches like from his own personal opinion, you should pay your taxes. But then Mark actually reifies that information into Jesus's mouth by having Jesus say, hey, you need to pay your taxes. And so it's very obvious that Mark is using Paul in order to invent things that Jesus said. And we know that Jesus didn't say those things because Paul is very adamant about pointing out when Jesus has determined something or Jesus has said or commanded something.
Yeah,
right.
He usually says the Lord, and so we don't know if he's talking about the Lord Jesus or the Lord God, for one thing.
Right.
One of the problems.
Right. Yeah, and so like that's one of the curious things about the Paul in his relation to the Gospels is that Paul seems to not know Jesus said things, but he holds the same position as Jesus. So there's kind of a disconnect there.
Yeah,
that's
Joel,
interesting. And I'm also inclined to. Oh, go ahead, please. Sorry, I think there's a delay.
Well, I'll just. Sorry for the delay as well. I was just going to say, find me on Facebook. I'd love to talk to you more about this because this is my bread and butter when you're working on your book. What were you going to say, though, Joel?
So I also agree that it's very hard to gain an idea of a historical Jesus from the letters of Paul. My only thoughts on Paul is I just read Robert Price's The Amazing Colossal Apostle, and he thinks all the letters of Paul are forgeries, and I'm really coming around to that position. Certainly the pastoral letters are fake.
That seems too extreme to me, but certainly half of them for sure are forgery. That's not even controversial. Yeah.
Right.
And I believe that the textual analysis done on the ones that are considered authentic, it's just that they're authentic in that one person wrote them and this person calls himself Paul kind of thing. I'm not sure what Robert Price's whole position is on it, but
well, one thing you can say about Paul, whatever we think about whether there was a real Paul or not, those letters, even the ones accepted as genuine, they have been reworked, redacted, interpolated, played with. Some of them are mashup of other letters, so it gets really messy really fast to say, what the real Paul was, even if you think there was a guy writing letters in the 50s and not something that Marcion made up, for instance.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think what's been interesting that Robert Price points out was just let's stick to the pastorals because I think that's relevant. But him and another guy named Hoffman in the 80s found verbal similarities between the pastoral letters of 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, and between a writing of Polycarp of Smyrna. So they think that Polycarp's the forger, and I think they're right.
We got to move on, y'all. This is becoming one of those three atheists call and just agree with each other calls.
We're having a healthy discussion.
Yeah,
do it in a coffee shop. Not on my time.
All right, Joel. We'll talk.
I will. I'll add you on Facebook. All right.
Super.
All right.
That's
see you
good.
later,
Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Mean old Jimmy spoiling all our fun.
John's probably like, man, I haven't done a line in a while, but I don't remember Jimmy being this big of an asshole.
No, I just figured maybe I'm not quick on the trigger as you are. It has been a while since I've been on the line, so thanks for that, Jimmy.
There's only like 3 or 4 people on the entire line cast who are mean enough to move things up. Like I have to jump in when Forrest hosts alone when people are, because he's the most polite, sweetest man in the fucking world. And I'm just like, you guys are having a coffee shop chat, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Get the fuck, move the fuck on.
You gotta know. This is all good stuff. People gotta know it.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Move on.
All right, give us the slave of God, and we'll wrestle with him for a while.
No, but we got a theist waiting to talk to you.
Yeah, we got a theist waiting to talk to us. I will say that the pastorals were definitely. I feel like the mainstream position is they were not written by Paul. But they were all most likely written by the same person. Now, whether that's Polycarp, I'm not sure. But I reserve stating like things like that until I'm fairly sure. So. But anyways,
it's not even controversial to say the pastoral letters, the Deuteropaulines, all the mainstream biblical scholars, including many Christian believing scholars, agree that those are probably not original Paul.
Right.
So that's not even controversial to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So the final caller we have tonight is Joseph. He's a theist from Georgia. And I tried hitting the button, and there he goes. Hey there, Joseph. How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Thank you for calling in.
Yeah. I wanted to say, guys, that you guys had a nice show today. Very cool.
Thank you.
Good topics. And that guy, I never seen him before. David,
Yes.
you can tell he's a good communicator,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I can tell, I can tell that's your talent, communicating. You express your words very well. You're like a linguistic, you have linguistic intelligence,
Tú eres muy amable, Jose.
Yeah, no, I was calling because you guys were talking about Jesus, and Jesus. Everybody thinks, for example, the word evolution. You guys believe in evolution and science, right?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just that God created everything, but God in that evolution and science, it's involved with it,
But
Well, okay, so tonight we're.
If that's
the
true,
thing about the thing I was saying is because people think that there are some religious people that they don't believe in evolution, and evolution is part of the design. For example, Jesus, he's not like what the Bible says. First of all, the Bible was written by men, so there's going to be a lot of mistakes, made up stories, and that's not how it works. There's one God in the Middle East. There's one God over here in the United States. It doesn't work like that. It's only one design, one God,
But
okay, Joseph.
So my point is like, I don't blame you guys for all these callers, or like, if I will read the Bible, I will not believe in that God, It just doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
Okay, Joseph.
The Bible starts with the story of Genesis, like, oh, God created. It doesn't work like that.
Joseph.
They just did that story because they didn't have like
Joseph.
Joseph,
right,
shut up.
Sorry. So I muted you, Joseph, because you weren't stopping. Now, if you want to call in on a different night where somebody that knows more about like evolution and all this other stuff, you got more expert opinion there, please do. But tonight what we're talking about is the like historical reliability of Jesus or the New Testament or anything like that.
And I do say I love evolution. I'm not an expert by any means, but the book I'm working on now is all about the evolution of religion and the evolution of monotheism.
Next
and I'm
Monday.
super excited about that. So we can talk about that sometime.
I'm pretty sure next Monday is Aron and Forrest together, literally two evolutionary biologists. That's if you want to debate evolution and all that, and evolution's historicity with the Bible. That's the time. Are you gonna unmute the guy?
Yeah, I got it.
Cool.
Okay, Joseph. So
I'm here.
You're talking about tonight's topic, which is whether or not Jesus existed, and it's mainly about the historicity of like the New Testament, historicity of Jesus, that kind of thing. Is there anything that you can contribute like in that area?
Yeah, no, of course. That's what I was going for. You know, it's just that Jesus is you guys kind of believe in something like he wasn't like what the Bible says. You know, Jesus, his plan was to save the world, but something happened and he couldn't do it. And again, who's going to have that mission by the end is the next chosen. And the next chosen, it has a new nationality. And it actually, he has awakened. You know, the guy that everybody's been waiting, to save the world. Well, guess what?
Yeah, Joseph, shut up. I muted you this time. You're Joseph. I can see your bar still moving. Shut up. All right, I've unmuted you, but don't talk yet. There's a topic tonight, and you're just here to tell us about your end of days apocalyptic, and you've met some guy named, I don't know, Topher in Russia, and he's the new Jesus, and everybody should praise him. Shut the fuck up about all this shit that has nothing to do with tonight's topic. And if you have evidence that Jesus actually existed, the real fucking guy, that's what you can talk about. But I swear to God, if you keep trying to get us to all collectively suck on Topher's dick, I'll hang up on you for these two. So you can talk about Jesus actually existing in the past, in the Bible, or nothing at all. What's it going to be, Joseph?
Jimmy, I've never loved you more.
Can I talk now?
Maybe.
Yes. Probably.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, of course. You know, what I mean is that I didn't side or anything like that. And I'm not against evolution. I didn't come here to have a debate about evolution.
Nobody talked about evolution but you. I muted you again. Jesus fucking Christ. Follow fucking instructions. Joseph, here's your instructions. And if the next words aren't, if the next sentence that you say doesn't start with, the evidence for the historicity of Jesus is, if that's not the beginning of your next sentence, you're fucking done, my guy. Fuck. Okay, here you go. Remember, the evidence of the history of Jesus is, repeat after me and then finish the sentence. Go.
Okay, the only reason I wanted to say this is just to prove that you have a mental imbalance. That's why.
Eat my ass. I already know that. You can't do shit for me, Joseph. That's why I go to a therapist. But my mental imbalance has nothing to do with what a fucking boring ass sack of shit you are, all here to tell the message of fucking Topher and how we have to suck his ethereal dick. Otherwise, we're not going to get to go and sing terrible music for eternity to the big fucking sky daddy. Fuck you in your fucking face. I already know about my brain imbalances. I don't need you to tell me about my brain imbalances. My therapist tells me she's disappointed in me every fucking week. Go fuck yourself.
Well, sure, when you put it that way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. I dropped the call, or I don't know if I dropped it or Jimmy dropped it, but I dropped the call.
Hot potato.
What's funny is when I mute on my side, I can see I can still see the audio bars because I don't mute in Collins Studio. I mute on my board. So I'm not kidding. I was seeing I was talking, telling him to shut up for like 10 seconds before he finally did. Like, fucking Christ. My therapist doesn't really say she's disappointed in me. I just was on a roll.
Yeah. Wow.
Well,
okay, so
that was awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome.
That was not as a productive conversation as I was hoping to end on, but
yeah.
I'm sorry. Hey everybody, I need money for therapy. So send super chats. $5 or more will be read on the air. And it also supports the host of these shows. It supports our ongoing and expanding network and all the things we're doing. So send super chats of $5 or more because we're about to begin the super chat section while these two have a wrap up conversation, and then we or we can just jump into super chats if you want. But there's only a few so far. I don't even think we've paid for the call-in system today. So come on, get them in, people. Give me money, please. I have to buy more brain chemicals balancers.
Do we have Q&As for us?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna kind of wrap up as far as the calls go. I think that we really only had kind of the one really in-depth conversation, and that's Kai and talking about Nazareth and everything. And I think that Jesus could have existed and he could have come from Nazareth. That's one possible and somewhat plausible explanation. But I think that where I stand is that there's nothing in evidence that really pushes me to one side, like to the historicist side. And so given that it's equally likely that people could have just made up someplace that Jesus came from versus Jesus actually coming from there, I feel like it doesn't really add a lot of value to my conclusion. So my conclusion isn't affected by that, but that's because it's equally likely that both situations could have happened.
And I disagree only slightly that I don't think it's equally likely. It's like, for me, there's nothing improbable, but I don't think there was a guy at all. I don't see how there could be a guy at all, considering what we see in early Christianity, in the Bible, in the New Testament, and just the way it unfolded. And all the other things that didn't make the cut in the Bible. Things like the ascension of Isaiah that pastors never tell us about, where you've got just bizarre renditions of Jesus that don't make any sense on the standard Christian model. Things like that. We didn't talk about Josephus at all tonight, which I'm kind of surprised by. I am sure someone would bring him up.
Or the T one. What's the one that starts with T? Titanius?
Tacitus?
Tacitus, yeah.
And again, I talk about all those dudes in Nailed and Jesus Mything in Action. And in a nutshell, if you take just Josephus, who was born after Jesus was meant to have died and didn't write until the 90s, 93 or 94, even if everything word that he said was true, he's still just saying what the average Christian on the street said about Jesus. But in fact, we have a forgery from Josephus. He never said anything about Jesus. We've got a reference to James, the brother of Jesus, who's actually James, the brother of Jesus, son of Damnius, a completely different Jesus altogether. And Christians cling to those two references because without Josephus, there's nobody outside Christianity who noticed it for the first 100 years or more.
Sorry, go ahead, David.
Well, and that's is we've got all these feuding house cults, we've got all these different writings, and yet of all the first century, we've only have Paul for the most part. We've got a bunch of forgeries later from epistles of other people who were early Christians, but there's this whole iceberg underneath that's either gone or never existed in the first place. And the stuff that we do know of, a lot of it doesn't fit the Christian narrative. Like the Nag Hammadi Gospels that were written hundreds of years later. If we had never found that cache of early Christian writings, and by early I mean 3rd or 4th century, we would never know that there were Christians who were A, just making up scriptures whole cloth, and B, the weird-ass crazy things they believed about Jesus.
Mormons believe as a matter of doctrine that James is the literal brother of Jesus, and that they don't believe in a virgin after Jesus, Mary. They think that once she had that baby, she was like, I'm trying to have 8 or 9 more, because they literally think he had a huge family.
Yeah. Well, of course they would. Yeah.
Well, and I just wanted to point out that the arguments that we're highlighting here against, like the Testimonium Flavianum or the James passage or even Tacitus, these are not mythicist arguments. These are mainstream biblical scholars, New Testament scholars that have made these arguments. So these are Christians that are making these arguments against those sources. So it's not primarily mythicists.
Yeah,
and I want to jump on that. I just want to dovetail on that real fast. It's like a lot of atheists act like mythicists are this pariah in biblical studies. And I want to just point out what John said earlier is like most of what we're arguing is mainstream. It's part of the consensus. We just take our conclusion a little farther than some are comfortable doing or contractually obligated to go.
Do you want to hear the results of the poll we did? I started it 18 minutes ago. Did Jesus exist? We've got 276 votes, 3%. So what's that? Like 8 people said yes, real dude, real miracles. I know 33% said yes, real dude, just a dude. 52% said probably not. Why would he? And then I got to tell you, this 12% might be inflated by some of the people who just wanted to be able to say, obvi not cheese breath. Cheese breath isn't even a real insult. Kind of just reminds me of Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Anyway, whenever you're ready, it's up to you all. If you want to trade reading off Super Chats, if you want me to read them to you, some of the hosts do that. I'd certainly love to hear. Well, I'd love to hear Brocephus read at least one tonight.
Brocephus.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, which one do you want me to read? This first one as Brocephus?
Hell yeah.
Okay. Love the line. All its guests, hosts, mods, and producer. Thank you for everything you do.
That's wonderful. And that's a good reminder, so we can take a moment to thank Quail Coffee, who was tonight's screener. Also, a special shout out to Ilya. I got cookies. I want to say, I think I saw Dylan in here earlier. Yep, Dylan was here tonight. And Stephanie, I know, sometimes jumps in. Basically, everybody who has a wrench and helped with their wrenches. And I had to remind the audience, I had to remind the mods tonight that insulting me is actually allowed. Insulting guests are not. Just straight out insulting. But people try and insult me, it's fine. Unless they get too personal, like, you know, tell you where I live or what where I shop. I don't know, something that's weird about my personal life. I care more about that than. But people want to say I look like I smell of cheese breath. That's fine.
Sure. Thank you, Atomic Dracula, for the love. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Atomic Dracula.
Apparently, somebody made an entire YouTube channel now about this frizzed out Jesus that was behind me. So
that's awesome. Is that homemade? Is that homemade?
No, it's not. Troll doll.
It was off of Amazon. So I mean, yeah, he's pretty wild haired.
I'm sorry I haven't made a video about it yet. I don't even know if I know where all the stuff is. So I ended up rearranging stuff and got sick and all that shit. But do you want to show people the dick wand I made for you?
Oh dear.
Yeah.
This is my show the dick qualities. There's 2 of them. There's the you got to get it on close on the tip.
Wow. Holy Hufflepuff, Batman.
Yeah.
That's
and then
there's the beads.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm showing off makeup. Thank you, honey. And then there's a chode on the.
That's right. I gave him a chode handle. I'm glad it's within hand's reach. I feel like that means it's getting use.
Oh yes, I use it like almost every I had a sponsorship where I used it in the sponsorship. At some
point, I'll even if I don't make a longer video, I've got to release the video of me just carving it up and because you keep seeing me just over lubricate the shaft. I'm like applying finish and like going up and down the shaft of it quite a bit. I'll slow it down and play music and everything. But yeah, I made that on a lathe for GE. Yeah,
it really is handmade. Wow.
Yeah,
that was really lovingly crafted.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said this part isn't a bit. The shape is a bit, but this isn't. So this super chat looks weird because I had to copy and paste it. It was sent so much before the show started that it wasn't available to add into the show. But basically, someone had sent a super chat hours prior from Australia, Andrew Nawalani, who had said, question for David Fitzgerald, who/what does Brethren of the Lord in Corinthians 9:5 refer to in your opinion, and why? Cheers from a historicist.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. There's the passage in Corinthians and the passage in Galatians where Paul mentions people who are brethren of the Lord. And the whole brethren of the Lord thing is probably the most common historicist pushback I get from mythicists, saying, well, how could you have mythicism if Jesus had brethren? And for starters, Paul considers all Christians brethren of the Lord. He calls all the Christian brothers brethren of the Lord. But in those two passages, the one in Galatians and the one in Corinthians, it seems like there especially seems to be a group of missionaries who were known as the brethren of the Lord specifically. And there's more discussion to be had about that in Nailed and in Jesus Mything in Action. But in a nutshell, that's what it boils down to.
Someone said I can't say Irish wristwatch 3 times fast. I can't say it regular speed. I had to slow that the fuck down. Irish wristwatch. Wow, that's tough. Someone give it a try. David.
Iris wristwatch. Iris wristwatch. No.
You said Iris, I think.
Yeah, I did.
Wristwatch. Iris wristwatch. Wristwatch. Wow, that's tough.
Wristwatch. Yeah, that's right. You got it. Wristwatch. Wristwatch pish posh. Bro Cephas, you want this one?
Okay. As Earl Doherty said, we need to take off our gospel glasses when reading the New Testament. I agree.
Okay, I gotta say, cheers to Earl Doherty. Earl Doherty is what made me the mythicist I am today, because he was the first one that I discovered when I was looking in this whole parsing out what's real and what's not about Jesus. I realized, there's somebody out here who says there was no Jesus. Earl Doherty got me on all of that, and so huge love to Earl Doherty. And yes, we have to take off our gospel glasses when reading the New Testament, and we have to take off our Zoroastrian glasses when reading the Avesta, and our Hindu glasses when reading the Bhagavad Gita. It's like all these religions come with their own evolved story that we get way after the fact. But the further you go back in early Christianity / Islam / fill in the blank of every single religion that's ever existed, the further we go back in time, the less it looks like anything the official story tells us.
I think one of the most common things that a lot of people do is they import information that's contained in the Gospels into like Paul's understanding of things, and so that's a pretty big problem too.
Absolutely, and it's because, as you point out, it's because Mark took Paul's letters, names of characters came to us from Paul's letters, things that he put later in Jesus's mouth come from Paul's letters. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. I got words about putting things in Jesus' mouth. Dave, you want to read this one?
Yeah. Cameron Richardson's asked, would it be worth it to buy the NRSV-UE, that's the new revised standard version, the new updated version, for a more accurate translation, or would the NRSV, the old school version, be good enough? Good stream, as always. Great stream, as always, everyone.
Aren't they all free on Google?
No.
Oh.
Well, you can find NRSV on like Bible Hub and things like that. And I tend to make the NRSV my go-to because it tends to be, not always, but it tends to be one of the more honest translations out there. Like NIV and Living Bible's right out, but NIV would be happy to twist the truth like a balloon animal when it comes to changing words to mean their opposite or something completely different. Jesus didn't really mean that. Let's fix that. And they're constantly doing that. NRSV has a better track record. And NRSV UE and the Catholic version of that, I don't know enough about the difference between those two new versions to make a judgment call, but I suspect NRSV UE is just as good as NRSV and vice versa. I don't really know how they've improved it.
I'd just love to get numbers on this. A scale of 1 to 10, and a NRSV as far as trustworthiness, accuracy.
Well, it's my go-to.
Just give a number, but 1 through 10, like an 8, 9?
Yeah, probably 9 out of 10. Maybe. Okay. I mean, that's just
and then
gut call.
Compare that to like KJV. What would you give that one?
Probably a 6 or an 8,
NIV?
Well, here's the thing. we're acting as
David, I'm setting up a joke. David, I'm setting up a joke. Don't take this so seriously.
Maybe the 2 or 3 at best.
Okay, and then JST. What would you do with that one?
JST? What's JST?
The Joseph Smith translation. Real thing that really exists. What number? This joke would have gone better if you had played along from the onset. But 1 through 10, JST.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I missed the memo. Sorry.
JST gets a negative number, I think.
Negative number. Well, yeah, it's fan fiction. It's fan fiction.
So I at one time I was I'm still kind of trying to do it, but I was building a Bible app that I was gearing it towards, being a good quick reference for, Bible verses for atheists. And I come to find out that all of the popular Bible versions out there, the translations, you have to pay for. Like if you're going to use it like in an app, like you have to pay. So like BibleGateway.com, they have to pay for access to like the ESV and pay for access to all those other different things. Cause you can only quote like for free, like 500 verses like out of it. So
thank goodness for parody and commentary laws. Otherwise we'd be fucked on Aron Ra's show.
But I mean, somebody was talking about this just on YouTube earlier today, talking about how there is no the Bible. And I would love to have an atheist Bible that has all the Gospels with all the alternate endings. I'd love it with all the controversial things that are the verses that are in question.
Anything called an atheist Bible better have pictures of titties in it, or I'm not going to financially support it.
It's not like there's a lack of titties in the Bible.
That's correct.
Psalms alone.
I was going to say, Psalms better get fucking pornographic or I'm out.
Yeah.
Good old Liz Chris sent $50 with the, thank you so much, Liz Chris. You all would know her as Elizabeth Chris, but us insiders know she's Liz Chris. For all the myths of Jimmy. I don't know what that necessarily means. No one really knows if I exist, I guess.
Yeah.
Who wants this one?
I'll do it. I missed most of this stream. Did we prove Jesus, or are we all atheists now?
We did. It was only about 10 minutes in. We proved him.
Yeah, it was pretty cool because they were crying and saying, "You're right, you're right." And we said, "Yeah, it's okay."
I feel like I want to hear Brocephus say the name of the person who sent it and then react to saying the name as Brocephus.
Harry chair stepper. What the fuck does that mean?
What?
What's a chair stepper? Like you're a hairy Sasquatch and you step on chairs everywhere? Like are you a short Sasquatch that you got to get on a chair in order to reach the high places?
I'd say that's the context.
What?
Short Sasquatch that needs a chair to reach the top level.
Has everyone here ever been in an office and they need to hang something or reach something up high, and rather than go to the other room to get like the little step ladder or solid chair, you try using the office chair, the fucking swivel computer chair, and you almost die a bunch of times?
That seems like that'd be a scary chair stepper.
Me too. Yeah. That's a scary. That is right. A scary chair stepper. That's good. Well done.
Yeah.
50 from Brian Zupke. Thank you, Brian. Great show. Now I want to do my own like Brocephus. Brocephus is his cousin Topher Cephas, since we established Topher into canon tonight. Great show tonight. This is the first live show I've caught in a while, but listen to all recent recordings and they've been awesome, especially the Christmas Even and New Year's Even shows. I added even to the second one because I liked the way it sounded better. Thanks, Jimmy, for having such a great network. Thank you for teeing up where I got to read a thanks to myself. I appreciate that very much. Very much. People don't thank me enough, let alone me. Okay.
I didn't realize reading it in a funny voice was part of the draw of the show, but now I see.
Oh yes, if people request, I'll often do it as Stewie Griffin. I could pull my Stewie out. Pulling my Stewie out got me probation. Anyways.
It's scary how good you are at that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
No pun intended.
You want this one, David?
Can't stay fire the in, but get these guys in again. They're great.
I think maybe it was meant to say can't stay for the end. I'm going to guess. Yeah.
Can't stay for the end. That makes so much more sense about it.
That was from Light Halcyon.
Yes, Light Halcyon.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I just want to say I agree. Please, Jimmy, have me on again. I would really like it.
Oh yeah.
Me too.
Deal. The main thing that happened that I feel like people think we're now like we don't like all of our friends anymore is that the Sunday show used to be exclusive. Like I was almost never on it, and now it's literally Matt and I every Sunday because a certain network. Matt stopped working with a certain network, and I was like, well, I know you're gonna do a Sunday show, so rather than you become a competitor, how about we just run that thing over here? That's our second show was born. Our second Matt show, I should say. RB, probably unrelated to the food chain, says, angry atheist wishes he had this knowledge of the books to argue at this level. Jimmy, you found God's best hosts.
Yay.
That's right. That's right. Y'all are God's best. I think this next one's for Bro Cephas. Did I put it up?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Peyton Dooley says, contributing to Jimmy's therapy. Great show, guys. Yeah, Jimmy, you really got to get in there and set that therapist right about the happy juices or whatever the fuck.
That's right.
Call them.
I got to tell you, I'm sure you all heard the silence as I tried to just come up with a simple name that could be the name of the new savior, and somehow I came up with Topher. I don't know where that came from. I don't know.
I know it.
What's that?
Topher Crispy, wherever you are out there, you're making a difference.
The only Topher I know is Topher Grace from that 70s show, the guy who played Eric on that 70s show.
No, from Aron Ra's show, Topher is the Israeli guy from Tel Aviv that keeps giving us commentary from Rashi. And
no, that's Tomer. Isn't his name Tomer? Yeah, his name's
you're right.
not
Sorry,
Topher.
it's Tomer. Oh my goodness, sorry, Tomer. Yeah, you're right.
No, it's Topher.
Jimmy, I agree. Tosifus would have been a better name.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. Do we put the in there like Tofifit? Oh, I can't do that. Fucking Irish wristwatch.
What?
Tofeces, that's right. I'm Tofeces. Welcome to the show.
Oh dear. I have to say though, when what was his name? Joseph was calling and about how, oh no, I know Jesus is all bullshit, but the new improved Jesus.
Yeah.
Ooh, let me tell you about that guy. It's like, wow.
What's his name? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's he. I wonder if that was the same guy who last week someone called in to talk to Forrest, and I decided to take the opportunity because the call had just began to evacuate my bowels, and so I could only sort of hear the show from the other room. I put it on the overhead speaker, and
thus thesis was born.
And somebody was like trying to compliment him by saying like, you're way better than, Jimmy's clearly got mental problems. And I'm just sitting there like, yeah, sure. But at least I don't accept a delusion because it makes me feel better. I face mine head on, you fucking Christian. Anyway. Kids Love Satan says, Jimmy, I'm a fan, but the mods are sus on me. This was the person who they sent as a joke that Jimmy's like a miserable capitalist or something when I was telling people to send chats, and they deleted his thing, and I was like, you guys, you can let the people insult me. It's fine. Who wants this one?
I'll have Jesus do this one. How's that?
There we go.
Dear.
F you, Jimmy. Just kidding, you're awesome. Love you, G.E.
I wish can he be modified with like a little finger, like a thing in his back that you move the finger and then his mouth opens up and down, looking like Yoda.
It's a doll,
or something?
Jimmy. Like it's just a doll.
So is Kermit the Frog, but he can talk.
Kermit has a hole up his ass where a whole arm can fit up there,
Can
Jimmy.
we modify a finger
We're talking
hole?
major surgery, Jimmy.
Give him a finger hole and then a little move-in mouth. And
look, I could just move his head. Fuck you, Jimmy.
Imagine if that mouth could open and how you could combine it with the dick wand. I'm just saying.
Oh.
Oh my goodness. We've only got a few more super chats, so if you all want this nonsense to continue on, you got to get your super chats in now. Rainbow Krampus says, make sure Topher gets his tithe. Brie huffing cheese breathers will turn in the light of Topher's wrath.
Burn in the light.
Oh, will burn in the light of Topher's wrath.
Burn
That's right.
there, Topher.
Some people pay a lot of money for just the right amount of burnt cheese. I think that's what a creme brulee might be. Yeah, you just want to burn that.
What's that thing where they take half a wheel of cheese and they heat it up and then they just take a spatula and they just off onto whatever plate?
Yeah, well, you can can't you just get a skillet of burnt cheese? Some people like that. I don't know.
Well, there's grilled cheese, which is quite yummy.
I'm not joining Topher's religion if it's anti-cheese. Fuck Topher. I am a cheese fiend. I'm not trying to make my bowel movements easy on me.
Yeah, breathe fucking cheese breather.
Yeah. Let's see. This one's addressed to me. Face asked, Jimmy, have you considered D&D and gaming woodcrafts for your future shop? Yes, I have. But the thing that you're going to see released first, possibly this week, because I'm planning on trying to batch out a bunch of them, but I am going to make probably out of maple so that I can laser engrave them. What I suppose you would call a miniature canoe paddle. Just a small, for canoe enthusiasts who might like a small hand-sized paddle because they love canoeing so much. I have two of the most.
I feel like this is not a paddle.
Correct. No, it's a paddle, all right. It's just not the kind of paddle I'm describing. I'm like, are you two the most vanilla fucking people I know? Wait, I don't know. Actually, I feel like if I open up some drawers at David's place, he just has like whips and.
Don't drag me into this.
I'm not. I'm certainly not shaming you. You just give off that vibe that there are like whips and what are those things with like the several tassels on them? It just seems
nipple
like
clips? Is that what you're talking about? Nipple clips? Whatever that is.
Yeah, you clearly have never heard of nipple clips.
David's like, I don't know what nipple clips are, but it sounds like nipple clips that you're talking about.
No, I wasn't talking about nipple clips. Those just came out of nowhere from you. Yes, I did say kayak last time. I am a kayaker, or at least I used to be. I haven't gone into. I'm planning on getting back into it, and I keep saying kayak paddle by accident. But kayak paddles are double-sided. These are single-sided. The handle fits comfortably in one hand. Wait, have you been to my?
You're saying tonight sounds super dirty.
Yeah, go to my Instagram. All right, do you have your phone there, GE? Because I don't have my phone. Yeah. Can you pull up my Instagram and show a picture of the miniature canoe paddle? I think it'll make sense if you pull it up on Instagram.
I'm picturing something.
I'm Jimmy A. Snow on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm getting a very George O'Keefe vibe from this whole line of conversation, I have to say.
It's no, it's not a secret penis. I'm not going to pretend something isn't a penis. I literally called it a dick wand.
No, that's true.
There we go. Is everybody on the same page on what that is now? Are we all good? You're about to see me lubricate that. That's what that video, where that video goes. It's all about me oiling up the shaft and getting it nice and lubed up.
Yeah. And here's a Christmas tree.
Uh-oh.
That's right. Wow. That's a Christmas tree I made. I actually have it nearby. It's propping up it fits very well into the roll of toilet paper or roll of tissue of paper towels, and I have it holding up my paper towel stand right now. You kind of have to jam it in, and it's a little bit difficult to get that in at first, but then suddenly you get past the threshold and it slips in much easier.
Maybe it just takes some training.
I'm having a good time. This is a fun night with my friends. y'all want to go get a beer after this? Harry Chairstepper says, don't pretend you don't know the Harry Chairstepper from the Bible. And how did you know I was a Sasquatch?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that you're a Sasquatch that's just not tall enough to reach the top of the thing. No offense to you, honey. God bless you.
Is a Harry Chairstepper from the Bible? Is this some sort of Samson reference?
I'm trying to think. What's this reference to?
I mean, hair and chair is for sure Samson. If you just said hair chair.
Hair chair.
Yeah.
Is this like Harry and the Hendersons kind of thing?
Oh, that could be. Yeah, Harry and the Hendersons from the Bible. Yeah, that makes sense.
We need more info. Really. We need more info.
Harry Chairstepper, I'll let you do it for free. You're going to have to tell us. You're going to have to tell us in the chat who's here. By the way, I told, do you all know Jess Heathen Queen?
Mm-hmm.
No,
I told her I need to get her a voice of God mic like mine to help people move along calls when they're being too polite. I was like, she'd be even better at it. Just yelling at people. All right, let's do the next one. Good old Liz Chris again. Cheese and rice be with us, supposedly. Hey, do y'all ever say supposedly? Do you ever put a B at the end?
Well, I mean, I think that probably when I was younger I said it, but I try to make sure I enunciate the D now.
That's right. You hit that D real hard. So just so everyone knows, it supposedly it's spelled different than you expect it to be, but it is a real word. It's supposed.
Supposedly.
SUPPOSABLY. It's basically it means that something is supposable.
Right.
Right, and that thing you could say supposedly. I just wanted to. I had been told once after saying it that I sounded like an idiot and like, oh, for somebody who's so careful with language, you still say supposedly. What are you going to say next? Irregardless? And I felt humiliated, and I didn't even question it. And then I later found out that and you know what the worst part is? The person who made fun of me died before I could correct him.
Oh,
yeah, that little fucker died, asshole.
Wait, so you murdered him just for that?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't murder him because my life would have been dedicated to the next time he ever should slip up. I'm gonna be there to make fun of his language. Oh, you said all of the sudden. But instead, I find out that it's true, and I'm like, fuck, I just went to his funeral. Fuck asshole. Douchebag.
Aha.
Anyway, I wrote it on his tombstone.
Supposedly.
Yeah, maybe. They never caught me, so. Who wants to read this one from Lost Fan? Oh, it says GE.
Okay. GE, please say, "What's up, heathens?" Then get close and say, "How y'all doing?" Please, if possible. If not, that's cool too. I love you.
I love the implication that you might think you're better than this suggestion, than this ask. That's hilarious.
No, that would be an insult to my dignity.
Oh my God. I would have roasted you so hard if you had been like, I don't feel comfortable. Oh my God. Oh, here, Dave, you can have this one from Weird Ernie.
Okay. From Weird Ernie. Trying to super chat one more time. I'm starting to think Jimmy doesn't want my money.
Yeah, so just so you know, I'm going to guess that the original one said, like, I'm fucking trying to super chat one more goddamn time. You know, you can't swear in super chats. It's pretty fucking annoying.
Unless you're a mod. If you're a mod, you can swear in super chats.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's incredible.
What's it all about?
Mm-hmm. I'll start selling wrenches.
All right, Elon.
That's right.
All profanity super chats now going.
Arby says, is GE going to be hosting more often? And is he ticklish? Well, he's now one of the official SkepTalk hosts. So I'd say that generally you're going to most often see SkepTalk hosts around once a month. Right now we keep partnering them up with each other. So like Forrest, you'll see twice this month because Forrest is joining for Aron's episode. But yeah, I'd say that's pretty much consistent until we get like so many SkepTalk hosts that we need to go less than that. But at that point, we might have to launch a second night of SkepTalk in a week.
Okay.
Casey, I'm gonna let yours through, even though it didn't reach. The rule is we only read $5 and above. Otherwise, we're here all night. But I'm gonna let yours through because it's funny.
So yeah, she says she'll spot you the $3.
I appreciate that.
I did not say that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. If you want, you can just if you want to do it as cash, you can just make it like, what would it be, $1.80? And just like take out YouTube's 30% cut. Fucking
just get on camera. Just push John out of the way.
That's right. I'm not even getting on camera. I can't push anyone else. And even if I did, hang on, do I have that old try one set up still? I used to have one with, because there was a night where it was 3 of us. I don't think I do, so I'm not going to, I'm not going to do it. I'm in the dark is all I was going to show you. It's quiet. Oh, KC made it better, but gave it to Jesus. I don't even know how to get a hold of that guy. Unfortunately, KC's aren't next. We've got a couple in the way. Brian Zupke says, "Now I'm feeling I'm at summer camp." Why? None of us have asked any like really weird questions. Like, hey, have you guys ever put anything in your butt? Because those are the summer camps I remember. Those are the. What's the weirdest way you guys masturbate? By day 3 of seeing no women, you just start talking about crazy shit with the other boys around. Jake Nelson says, "It's a flogger, Jimmy. And did you drop the V word? Fellow kickstart rock on with your bad self." What is the V word? Vagina? Did I say vagina?
I don't remember that.
I don't recall you saying vagina.
I don't think I said
Maybe all the
vagina.
talk about news made him think you were doing code talk. I don't know.
What's the V word? I can't even think of another V word. Vulva.
Apparently, people are really concerned about whether or not I'm ticklish, and I mean that's for KC to know and nobody else to find out.
I feel I'm certain you are.
It seems likely. I don't like the way all these people are so
Depends
jumpy.
on where you diddle them.
Did you hear, KC? It depends
really.
on where you diddle me.
That's right.
Thank you, honey.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
This was Wintermute's best attempt. Only 2 more super chats after this one. Again, if you want to extend the show and keep it going, you know what you got to do. Wintermute 740's best attempt at swearing is to say "sick." I feel like it's one of those things where you say to somebody, you don't even really know what it means. But when I look at John, I just go, "You look ticklish." Do I understand why? Not really, but there's something about you where I go, "You look ticklish."
Yeah. I look like a teddy bear is what I look like, so that's probably it.
Here, let's take a chat.
Fluffy?
Let's take a poll about let's end the old poll, and I want to know if people think I'll reveal the answer as soon as somebody let's say super chats $25 asking for the answer, and you don't have much time because the show's almost over. Is Jimmy ticklish? And I'm going to ask the community. We've got the poll, and I'll reveal the correct answer for $25. That's how I roll. This is how I navigate this capitalist hellscape. KC says, "Fuck yeah, I can." Hi to 3 of my favorite people. KC with a wrench gets to swear.
Yeah.
That's funny. And then KC either says, "Here, Jesus," or says, "Here, Jesus." Or maybe
Dude.
maybe it's like a pet.
Thank you, my child.
Maybe Jesus is like a dog. Like, "Come here, Jesus. Here, Jesus. Come here. Come here, Jesus. Here you go. I'm waiting to see if any super chats come in. 75 votes and 84% of people say, am I ticklish? And 83%. I hope I get the opportunity to answer whether or not I'm ticklish or not. But it seems like the show's coming to a close. Why don't you plug your books real quick, David, while we see if anybody rises to the occasion?
Sure. If you like to learn more about mythicism, why not take a look at some of these books? We've got, here, can I line it up? They're nailed, 10 Christian myths that show Jesus never existed at all, sort of the intro to the subject. And then there's a 3-part book. Come on, it looks good on this screen. There, it's great. Jesus Mything in Action, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And again, stay tuned this year for my new book, working title still to be determined, but basically about the evolution of all the world religions and looking at the biographical info of backstory of all the major world religions.
So yeah,
fun stuff.
I'd also like to plug my book. It's not actually mine. It's just a pornographic book I really like. I almost have finished my first novel. I like that sentence, and then you make it because people presume that you mean writing one. I meant reading. I've never read a novel. Anyway, that's not true. Liz Chris gave $26 for the answer. So,
yay!
102 votes so far, with 79% of people being mostly incorrect. I mean, I have the normal tickle responses, like you develop ticklish feet, I think, because your feet have to be really sensitive to things you step on, and if a snake crawled in your bed and shit like that. My feet, I wouldn't say I don't laugh when you tickle my feet. It's more of a fuck you, and you probably accidentally get kicked in the eye. And then nobody I feel like is comfortable with things in their armpits, but I am so averse to being touched by somebody that I don't, first of all, generally being touched by most people, but just things like a handshake or even a hug, and anything outside of that. I feel like if somebody's trying to tickle me, I'm mostly just frustrated that they're touching me in ways that I haven't said they could. I don't like to be touched. So I don't feel ticklish. I feel just quite mad, frankly. You weren't asked to be here. Then I guess if it's with a romantic partner, I probably am disappointing. I've had people try to tickle my ribs and stuff, and just not really anything happens. Yeah. If I smoke weed, there's a few different things on my body that do become very I feel like I can feel the texture of fabrics against my penis, and I can feel like my tongue gets super sensitive, and I can feel chip textures and stuff more, but that's about
it. Weird. It looks like Einstein fucked a troll doll.
The joke's on him. The joke's on him. I can only climax if I imagine Jesus looking at me judgmentally. Years ago, there was an apostle at the Mormon church who said that he doesn't believe anyone could sin in their head. They could commit thought sins if they were thinking of the song "I Am a Child of God," or it might have even just been, I don't believe a person would be able to sin if they were singing "I Am a Child of God" in their head. And now it's literally the only way I can get a boner. I am a child of God. Oh, here we go. Jake Nelson says vanilla, and it was supposed to be Kinkster. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, I should end the poll. Some of you are now voting, and you've heard the answer. It's sort of unfair. All right. John, you want to tell people where to find you? And if no more chats come in, we'll call it a night.
Okay, so I'm the Godless Engineer. If you want to learn more about mythicism, and currently I'm kind of reviewing scholars who are arguing against mythicism and what they say about it. So if you want to see the mainstream scholarship versus what the actual mythicist position is, then come on over to my channel. It's just Godless Engineer at all the different social media places, and y'all can find me there. Oh yeah, and I've got an app on the app stores named Chrestus, CHRESTUS. Sorry. It's about mythicism. It has all the great information that you'd find and resources and everything. So definitely check that out too.
Very cool. We'll see everyone back here on Wednesday for the Hang Up. Matt's guest that night is David Warnock. Thursday, Katy will be joined by somebody. I think it's either Ben or Josie. Actually, I think they're still deciding who it is. But Katy Montgomerie will be there for sure. And then on Sunday will be another episode of the Sunday Show, and then Monday will be, I think, Forrest and Aron, and then Tuesday I'll be back with the next episode of HOSTility next week Tuesday, where I will be joined by Eve Was Framed, an ex-evangelical TikToker who I think is awesome and everybody's going to really like. And I guess we have one more thing to go out on, because Quagma TV sent $5 and says, gotta love when that religious trauma comes, put in an unexpected way. Am I even real? Who knows? I have no evidence to believe that you are real, Quagma TV. Just like all the fucking 13-year-olds that are coming to attack me on Twitter with their anonymous anime Twitter profile pictures and their handles something like smitten and bitten 21. Fucking shit. I'm so tired of Twitter. Love you all. Thanks for joining. Bye.